Hello and welcome to this episode of the New Game Plus live record for television. Thank you for joining us. My name is Jason. I am your host for today. Jack is taking a couple of weeks off, which he's definitely earned, to go do his university work. So gambarimasu, Jack-san. Jack-kun? I guess we get away with Jack-kun. We're close. We're familiar. Don't worry. That's the end of the weeb shit. Don't worry. That's the end of it. I am joined, of course, by faces you have seen before. Miss Megan, who, of course, is one of the long-time regulars. Miss M, the new blood. And Carty, I guess you've been around the... Well, no, who'd been around the longest? Who do we count out of you and Megan? Who's been around the longest? What do you reckon?
Just
how do we do that?
Me as the other guy, and we'll be done with it.
The other guy.
I reckon Matt's done
me.
way more episodes than I have in total over that duration.
That is true. That is probably true.
So my youthful appearance.
Yes. Yeah. Wow. Look. So we have obviously another big episode coming up. We have the news as per usual. We have Tony Hawk. The recent release of 1 and 2, Mario 3D Pack, and discussion about digital scarcity, because digital scarcity, of course, is just dumb. And then we're going to have a chat about Tell Me Why. But for now, I guess it's best that we cover off the news. Now, what is the big news? The big news, of course, this week is Microsoft. Just Microsoft in general. Everything they've done this week, it's been their week. You would think at the end of last week it was all Sony. Sony came out there, they released their specs and their prices and all that kind of silliness. But Microsoft has now bought Bethesda Soft. Oh, well, they bought ZeniMax. So ZeniMax is, of course, the company that owns Bethesda. So they bought all the ZeniMax properties for $7.5 billion. That is $1 billion less than they paid for Skype. And I believe it's $500 million less than Disney paid for Marvel and Star Wars. So wow. They are desperate for some Fallout action on the Microsoft platforms. So it does mean now that those properties become the property of Microsoft. So Doom, Wolfenstein, Fallout, all these kind of great games. But we're not 100% sure what it means for distro, because in the Sony press conference they had Deathloop, which is a Bethesda game, console exclusive to PS4. Now, is that going to remain console exclusive to PS4? Who knows? Because, it's now under the Microsoft purview to do whatever they want. They have said that they'll change that on a case-by-case basis, and depending on how that goes, they'll obviously release games how they see is going to be the best fit for their platform. But it does mean, obviously, a lot of Bethesda games are going to come to Game Pass. I mean, is there anything that you guys are particularly excited for out of all of those games, or is it just a kind of a Microsoft going to Microsoft? Because no one expected this. This one was straight shot in the dark. No one would have called this in a million years.
It's a big deal. All I want to say is there going to be a new Fallout New Vegas 2? Now that there's money coming into the funnels, I think that gamers out there are frothing at the bit of what the possibilities this could mean for future IP and just more content from their favorite developers. So for me personally, I don't play many of the Obsidian games or anything like that, so it's not really my cup of tea, but I think it's a massive step in the right direction. Yeah.
Agree for sure, and I think one of the main points there is that Microsoft own both In Exile, which is the makers of the 2D Fallout games, who now make Wasteland, and they own Obsidian, which are the creators of New Vegas. So realistically, they could do both 2D and probably the best 3D Fallout game with the developers of those individual games. Granted, obviously the teams aren't exactly the same and all that kind of stuff, but that in itself is a pretty big deal.
Their portfolio is growing. Like, not only do Microsoft now own Mojang, they also own Double Fine and Ninja Theory. So I think that obviously they're seeing dividends with their current investments and seeing that it's keeping core players on their platform for longer and coming back for more. So it's a big deal when, I guess, like, in my opinion, their exclusive IP is really limited now. Like, whatever's only on their platform. So I think, not that they'll make that decision, but at least they're keeping a lot of fingers in all the pies. Yeah.
Anything from you other two, or it's kind of meh, like you don't really care too much?
Listening to Meg's marketing insights is just enough education for me. I'm just excited if Fallout New Vegas comes to Game Pass, because this will be the Xbox Series X will be my first Xbox. So
right. I want to guess that it's already on there. I would nearly guess that it actually is. I either own it because I bought it. It's on sale all the time for like $7 with all the DLC, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if Fallout New Vegas is on the Game Pass. I'm going to look that up while you guys are talking to the nice people.
Jace, you were saying that because of this acquisition that ZeniMax want to stay independent and sort of own their shit. Do you know much more about what that looks like?
So all we know is that they're going to keep Bethesda independent. Apparently, they're going to let them just do their thing, and that's kind of it. And then what will happen is they will, on a case-by-case basis, figure out whether they're going to release it on the next platform or not. So it looks like Todd's keeping his job, which to me is probably the most unfortunate part of it. Like, I thought for sure Todd would get the ass. Yeah. Oh, look, I don't know, man. I just hope he doesn't make any more games. That's I'd be happy with that. But we don't know what happens with Pete Hines. We don't know what happens with the core main Bethesda team. They reckon they'll keep it the same, but I reckon they'll also offer a lot of parachutes for people who want to jump off the wild Microsoft ride that exists. We'll see. I don't know. Doom Eternal is also coming to Game Pass in the next thing, and obviously that's part of this deal as well. So, and it turns out that New Vegas is on Game Pass, M. So yeah.
Hey, M, let's do it.
It really is a massive deal. Like, I think a lot of us, I can kind of say for a lot of people that we're still trying to wrap our heads around the implications of what this means. Specifically, just how much media ZeniMax actually owned and was sitting on in terms of
sure.
IP. You know, the massive Interplay buyout from like many, many moons ago. They've still
remember.
Like, old PC titles and all these IPs that they're still kind of sitting on and doing nothing with. Like, Microsoft can sit there and go, you know, this PC platform is ours. Like, you know, where we failed with games for Windows Live, we are going to succeed.
For sure.
And they've also got a huge amount of assets and talent behind this massive buyout. So not only did they buy all these studios, you got like, you know, these great studios like id Software, Arcane Studios, Shinji Mikami and all his mates at Tango Softworks. Yeah. Notice how I didn't mention anything about Bethesda Softworks.
Yeah. Well, like I say, the best thing that could happen is Bethesda Softworks gets shut down. Let's be real. Like, that sounds harsh, but like, I don't know the last good game they made. I can't think of it off the top of my head.
Someone needs to tell them to put their games on a less shittier Frankenstein's monster of an engine.
That is, and I imagine that'll be one of the first things. I imagine they'll get pushed across the whatever Obsidian used. You know what I mean? Like for Outer Worlds, because Outer Worlds just feels like an extension of the Fallout universe.
Obsidian's definitely going to be this strange kind of bizarre world mentor role where, you know, Outer Worlds was their mic drop, and now they're going to look at the situation and go, you know, well, look who needs help. So, like, as far as I'm concerned, you know, Obsidian are kind of on cloud nine at the moment. They're in a really good position. And I'm sure that it would be the most pro-consumer move because, you know, how many people have gone on about how good New Vegas is. And it is very, very good, despite its problems. It's just going to be interesting to see how Microsoft kind of leverages this. Obviously, they're taking a very hands-off approach, like buying out a lot of these places, but still letting them rock. Like in the same way Sega did with, like, you know, the buyout of Atlas and Sammy and stuff like that, where they've just gone, you guys just keep doing your thing. We're just going to sit here and collect revenue.
Take the revenue. Yeah, pretty much.
And provide help where we need to. But aside from that, it's as pro-consumer as possible. I'm still a little bit hazy on what it means going forward. But a lot of these games that you see at the moment, like Deathloop and stuff, I think Microsoft are going to let ride. And they'll figure
I think it'll be the future thing. But speaking of Microsoft even further, so Microsoft pre-orders have started. The Xbox Series X and Series S pre-orders have started in Australia, and now they've started internationally as well. EB site crashed. EB site logged you out of your account and then wouldn't let you put your password in. Just blew up. So if you got in and got it EB, congratulations, you are one of the lucky few, or you are a scalper bot. One of the two. They're the only two options that really have. JB site would not guarantee that you would get launch. A lot of Telstra's customers, obviously Telstra have the all access, so they would have gotten some priority service. They did Wave, so some of their Wave, so Wave 1 and Wave 2, some of their Wave 2 customers have been promoted to Wave 1, and then obviously Amazon, Target have oversold their orders, so if you did order through Target, don't be surprised if you get an email telling you that you won't be getting a launch console. And then probably the other big kind of bombshell that snuck out in amongst it all is, we know that with Series X and Series S, you can store Series X and Series S games on USB 3 hard drives, like standard kind of hard drives. But if you want to play off them, you need to buy Microsoft's memory unit that's specifically, I think it's made by SanDisk, $365 for a terabyte. So to upgrade, $365 for 1 terabyte of increasing your memory. I mean, even by Microsoft, like hard drive standards, like you remember the bad old days of 360 where it's like, oh wow, I got my 120 gig hard drive and it's cost you $250. $365. And that is that'll be the launch rate. And I mean, that is some Sony Vita memory card levels of like shenanigans. So I'm very surprised they got away with it. But like, did you guys have any horror stories about the Microsoft launch or?
Jason, first of all, amazing overview of all that action that happened last week for that pre-order. I think, actually, was it Tuesday? God, it feels like last
Tuesday.
Week.
It was Tuesday.
Yeah, this week. I think you've summarized it perfectly. This isn't EB Games' first rodeo, and I'm actually shocked deep down that they don't have the infrastructure or a queuing system in place to facilitate the sheer amount of demand, especially when they sent out an EDM like 2 days before, telling all customers of the release date and the time.
Yeah.
Of course, we were going to be setting alarms at 8 o'clock in the morning to jump on, and by 8:01, it was gone. So I am flabbergasted about that.
Well, the scalpers are out in force now, so I reckon they just got scalper botted to death.
Sure.
Microsoft's definitely was in a position that actually gave people time to arrange when they were going to be doing their pre-orders. I mean, they set it about almost a fortnight in advance.
Yeah.
So it kind of wasn't like anyone, like aside from the infrastructure problems with EB and stuff, I'll get to that in a sec. But it's not really kind of anyone's fault. They kind of gave people enough of an advantage and enough of a warning. However, Sony, on the other hand, they announced all the stuff that they did. I think it was around about last Thursday, I believe.
It was Friday morning. It was 6 a.m. Friday.
Yeah, 6 a.m. Friday morning. Dropped their stream and then suddenly went, we're going to be accepting pre-orders as soon as possible. EB opened up the floodgates despite telling people 2 to 3 weeks ago to sign up for their mailing list to give them enough details on what's going on. Everyone blew up on Australian Twitter going on about how they didn't get a chance to pre-order because EB just immediately opened the floodgates. JB and a lot of other outlets like allowed some time, and there was a lot of like local game stores that just straight up like their websites crashed because they couldn't deal with the traffic.
Yeah.
It was a rush and a half, and it was absolutely messy. More so the Sony one, but the Microsoft one was still a mess. And let's say there was probably a few webmasters at EB having a very stern talking to for the last couple of days. It's messy. It's very messy.
I was going to say as well, I noticed with the PS5 pre-orders that they limited it to 2 per customer. And with the Xbox ones, it was per one. And I think I'm not sure if that was just on EB, but I didn't understand why that was there.
From my understanding, I think you could do multiple on JB. It just meant that you kept a spot in the queue. So I'm sure they would have looked at it and gone, like, there was no point on the JB pre-order that said that you only get one of these. You know what I mean? Like, you just went into the line, and depending on your spot in the line was how that went for you, basically. And so, I find it interesting that, like you say, Cardi, is it just seems like it's a botch job all around. Like, they had the Sony one to know what the problems were going to be, and yet they didn't fix them. Like, what's the point in having EB World, level 5 card, level 4 card, if you're not getting early access to these pre-orders? Yeah. You know what I mean? People would get salty about it, but then you could just turn around and say, well, you're not our preferred customers. I know that obviously you don't want to say that, but
5, though. You do get EDMs that let you know when shit's coming, but this happens with games like collector's editions as well. This isn't a hardware exclusive problem that happens once in every 5-year cycle. But when we were pre-ordering, they add on Tuesday for the Xbox Series X, I actually heard that people were ordering the wrong model because they didn't know the difference between
Amazon sales of Xbox One X in America were up 748% based on previous, because obviously people are gronks.
That to me is a testament to how freaking confusing over the years.
It's not great,
It's the Wii U all over again.
I had this conversation the other day, and yes, it is to an extent the Wii U all over again, but I think the difference is with the Wii U, people thought you just bought the tablet and added it on, whereas with this, at least if you've bought a One X, it'll still play most games for a year. You know what I mean? They're insisting on it being available on all platforms for now, and then in 2 years' time you can. So, it's a silver lining to what is an awful naming convention. I get that they've gone to the phone naming convention, iPhone S, iPhone X, that's what they're doing, but it doesn't work. Look, for all the things that Sony does wrong or right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Just give it a number. No one cares.
Does it even really work for iPhone? Do people really know? I feel like they copied without really doing research. Or
yes, but look. I mean, at this point, Tim Cook could do anything, and people would still give him money. So it's hard to really point that one out. Speaking of companies that can, I don't know, change. Again, it's been a week of just pre-order shenanigans. Nvidia, of course, announced the 30 series cards, so the 3070, 3080, 3090. And then announced originally that they wouldn't be releasing the 3080 and 3090 Founders Edition in Australia. And then suddenly they found stock. And then suddenly, of course, because it's Australia, there's the Australia tax. Now, I think roughly the markup is about 30-odd%, which is pretty standard for NVIDIA in Australia, for a lot of tech companies in Australia. Some companies try and, make it basic. I mean, if you think of the Xbox and the PlayStation, it's $750 compared to their American prices plus tax. It's basically dead on. Like, it's parity. Yes. Whereas with the NVIDIA cards, there's like a 20-30% markup based on the fact that we're in Australia. So anyone who's like keen on the NVIDIA cards, I don't know. Like it's definitely like Cardi. You're the resident PC guy. Did you buy one, or did you just go fuck it?
Now I'm the resident. No, just kidding. No, I think I still think that the AMD cards are a far more reputable, I guess, value proposition at the moment. Yeah. Because at the moment, Nvidia and Intel are getting away with as much crap as they possibly can at the moment. They're adding more markup to their cards, and they're waving the whole, you want a card with ray tracing capabilities in your face. And they're basically just doing that with a lot of the Intel CPUs too. And they're just like, don't you want this? As opposed to, if you go and look up the benchmarks, you'll notice that the Radeons, they don't particularly outperform the NVIDIA cards, but they cost far less. Yes. And they kind of almost match them in terms of performance. Just, a little less, but considering the amount you're paying for, that's it. So for them to do the whole Founders Edition thing of like, oh, suddenly we just found some in our warehouse. I definitely feel that was kind of like a little bit of market research where they just tried to see how many people would complain from Australia. And then suddenly they went, oh, cool, we're going to do that. And we're also going to give that to you for probably $200, $300 more than what the Americans are paying for.
I think it was more than that, but yes, you're right. Yeah. No, I think it was more than that. I think it was like $500-$600 more. But
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah.
Look, I don't know. I think in a world where... Sorry, you go, Meg.
I was going to say, we got stung on a waiting list from one of the local retailers here in Melbourne, and it was like a lucky draw that the retailer got to pick. Like, you had to put your email in, then you become a sucker to their EDMs, but then
the mailing list.
Each choice, chosen by them to purchase that product, like the Founders Edition or like any stock that they had, scraps left of that you picked. So we didn't hear back, so we didn't make the cut, and so we just had to wing it. But it's
it is a mess, and particularly with the way graphics cards work, is that if you're a person that has a lot of money and you want to get away with it, or you can if you can get away with it, obviously those graphics cards are going to be fairly costly, and then you wait for the first 3 or 4 months. Or a little bit later, and then the price starts to go down when the demand starts to increase. Supply demand, how it works. But at the moment, they're trying to do the same strategy that the consoles are at the moment, where they're trying to throw that kind of scarcity in your face of we could be making more, but we're not going to. So that way, people just keep selling out. And that is definitely a little bit dangerous too, because you've got a lot of people. It was same with the craze, about 4 or 5 years ago when there was a massive graphics card shortage because people were just using it to mine
for Bitcoining.
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's the same song and dance. And it's hard because you got so many people that want to create new builds. And as an owner of a 2070 Super, I'm a little bit fed up with how Nvidia's playing the game at the moment, because they're playing prison rules, and it's
Mustard Race will buy it. The problem is they'll get away with it. Mustard Race will buy it.
They'll sit there and make fun of you for buying an Xbox Series X and call you a loser, but they'll sit there and shell about $3,000 for a graphics card that's going to be obsolete in a year. So
that's a whole conversation about art styles and polygons that I could spend hours on. But for now, what we will do, we will go to a quick break, and we'll come back after the break with a discussion of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2. Alrighty, and welcome back to the live record of the New Game Plus episode that will appear on Channel 31 in the next few days. We're glad that C31's still alive. We're glad that people still watch us there, but don't forget to join us here on Twitch as well. It is a bit of a different experience. You can ask us live questions. We can react to you live. It's a lot more fun. Now, I'm an old man. I don't know if I mentioned this. I'm the grandpa of the group, and that's fine. I've accepted. Well, no, actually Gerard, but that's a different. He's like the great grandpa. Like, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. Now, I'm not convinced you guys would have the nostalgia for Tony Hawk's Pro Skater that I did. Like, being the age that I was, like, you guys would have been just young enough where you would have missed the cusp of what made Tony Hawk's 1 and 2 kind of revolutionary. For a game that started as basically like a mod of the Armageddon video. Was it Armageddon video game? One of the video games with, what's his name? Bruce Willis.
It was the same engine of Armageddon because it was done by Neversoft.
By Neversoft, correct. And so it was Bruce. The demo was Bruce Willis on a skateboard. They used the model and stuff like that. Yeah, so that's one of those. That's how old the game is. And obviously Neversoft, created this grand dynasty of games. And once you kind of hit, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4, you start to go from like it got a little bit Call of Duty-ish. Unsurprisingly for Activision, one was good, one was bad, one was good, one was bad. Tony Hawk's Underground, then anything with Bam Margera, put it in the bin, then set the bin on fire, then throw the bin into space. So there was a real time when Tony Hawk, it was one game every year. It was pretty much guaranteed. And then Rock Band kind of became the one game every year, and then Call of Duty's obviously been that as well since. And so then they made Tony Hawk 5, and it sucked. It was so bad. It felt awful. It had no sense of momentum. The people who made it obviously had none of that nostalgia. So they just said, screw it, we're going to re-release 1 and 2. We're going to license as many of the old songs as we can. It's going to be basically the same levels with the level editor attached to it. And the thing with it is, you remember why Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 were such great games. But the problem is they are still definitely of their era. But they actually hold up surprisingly well. Megan, you've played it a little bit. You didn't have the nostalgia for Tony Hawk's Pro Skater as a kid. You've only just played the remaster of 1. Is that correct?
Yes. I grew up with my brother smashing 1 and 2, and I'm watching vicariously. So when the remaster came out, I had to give it a go. I was blown away by, I guess, the level design and the uniqueness of, I guess, the whole aesthetic of every single, I guess, skate map. I don't really know what to describe it as, but how awesome they are, like, aesthetically. And I didn't really mind, like, obviously not having the nostalgia for the track in the OG game. I felt the new soundtrack was refreshing and different and modern. Like, it kind of felt like a new revamp in that sense.
Well, see, and that was the thing. So they brought back as many of the classic songs as they could, but there are a bunch of newer songs put on there as well, especially for 2. And I think that the thing with it is, like, the later games for Tony Hawk became basically open world adventures in some ways. You could get off your board, you could climb buildings to access other things. This is still about just basically skateboard based momentum. So you have to know where all the letters are. You have to over the amount of runs you do, the 2-minute runs that you do, you start to learn where everything is. You start to build up your player's stats, you build up your player's skills, all these kind of things. You can create a skater and pick how you want, like what kind of skills and tricks you want to focus. Do you want to focus on vertical? Do you want to focus on grinds and all that kind of stuff?
Games, when like you customize your own character, made your avatar feel the way you wanted it to feel, was there an advantage on having like a pro skater versus a customized one in terms of like abilities and agility and things like that? They bring this into the new one?
So the original first one, I'm pretty convinced you couldn't customize skater. That was something that came from the later ones. But definitely, because it became that thing of that they were grounded in the real world. Your guy wasn't. So you could just like, I don't ever want to grind, or I don't ever want to do X. The way I play, I don't use manuals, which you need manuals. So that's a bad example.
You kind of need to after the
just
game.
a little. Yeah, just a little bit, right? And so I don't want to focus on that. I'm more of a vert. Like, I'd rather make sure I can land my spins, or I'd rather make sure I can land this. You could definitely focus it more, but I think the thing with a lot of the existing names, especially in those days, was when Thrasher was so huge, and while skate cultures definitely survived, like lots of kids still skate and all that kind of stuff, it really hit that kind of that peak, that zenith in like that late 90s, early 2000s era, that it never has really hit again. But retro is cool again, and the game, luckily enough, is good enough that it carries as much of its quality through like as possible. Like, I mean, you don't have any particular history with it. Like, is there something I could do to convince you to play? Like, what would you like to know about the series that I could say, hey, try it because of this reason?
Well, I was just going to ask, like, do you think because it kind of did come out in the zeitgeist of that like 90s era, do you think it will resonate with people now, like who haven't played it, like me?
I would say the main difference is that the way the games are played has changed. The way that it does time trials, the 2-minute blocks of time. It's not something that's like most people don't time trial or score chase like that, like they used to on like, and that's not to say everyone does. And obviously there's still a sub like thing. People like it shifted towards the more open world style game for Underground and beyond. As a reaction the way players wanted to do it. So they didn't want to play it as just 2-minute time trials because at some point that does start, you do start to get diminishing returns. And once they hit kind of 3 and 4, they were starting to hit the point where it's like, okay, by 3, you've got the formula pretty full, like spot on now. There's not really much more you can add to it. And so then, they started adding on these extra elements. And some of them were distracting and some of them were really good. So it really did just come down to, what you were looking for out of it. But that is the main thing I would say. If you don't mind going, cool, I want to nail this perfect run to get the high score. I want to get all of the bells in the school, or I want to get kill all the boxes in the warehouse, or whatever the case may be. If you don't mind doing that same gameplay over and over and over again on a level that doesn't change, because roguelike has obviously made those kind of games unique in the sense that every run could be a completely different run. It still brings it.
Yeah, it definitely seemed like it would appeal to those kind of completionist sort of like players.
For sure. So every map has 10 checkpoints, 10 lists of stuff that you have to do. So it's get all the boxes, skate the word, get 3 high scores, grind a particular thing, do a particular transfer. All these like objectives that were checklist gaming. Like these were checklist gaming before Assassin's Creed sent you off to pick up feathers and flags, right? So this was how they did it back in those days. And so there's only limited appeal. And I would say the biggest issue with the game, I actually had a problem where the game didn't save on me, and so I lost all my progress for like 6 levels because I didn't exit to menu to save. So it doesn't save in between runs, it saves when you exit to menu. And so I did, like for the first 3 maps, I did every objective, got every point I could. And because I then unlocked enough points, it unlocked the next 3 or 4 levels. But then my things, so I had to start again, which is just as awful as it sounds. But the worst thing is the multiplayer, because at launch, the multiplayer was literally, you could play local or you could play 8-person playlist. Yeah, but it's only 8-person playlist online. So you had to join a public session with 8 people. Like me and Rags, one of our Discord community members, we were just going to play some, we'll play together, we'll play some horse, or we'll play some, just muck around the maps or whatever the case may be. But every single time we got put into games with these 8 other people. And, these guys had obviously played it heaps and blah, blah, blah. And so we were okay at the game as casuals, as people who've played it from the old days. But these guys obviously sat there and grinded it down. And the best player of Tony Hawk in our group is probably Porky, Jordan. And even he was like, some of these guys are beating my scores. And his scores are like, I think he got to like top 114 in the world on some of the maps. So like he's definitely up there in like some of the best players of the Tony Hawk franchise. But yeah,
kind of like with those kinds of games with those high high skill ceilings, where it's like, when you go and release a game like that, or re-release a game like Tetris, for example, like there's no such thing as casual Tetris. Like the people that are interested in it are going to feed it hard.
yeah, they're going to go hardcore, exactly. And so that becomes that thing. So having that fun element of just, let's just play with a couple of, let's just get 2 or 3 mates in a lobby and just mill around a map or whatever. But even the map is like a specific multiplayer map. It's not like we're going to just boot into warehouse and do that. So to me, it just felt like a really missed opportunity. And I'm sure later on the track they'll add it, but I like, it's not the kind of game you want to game as a service. They're not charging full price for it. There's no expansion packs. So you know what I mean? So
come in with like an affordable entry price point. But what I really want to highlight here is that this game, the remaster, actually reached 1 million units sold since its release on September 4, making it the fastest selling entry in the long-running franchise out of all the Tony Hawk games ever to exist. So I think that's a huge call out, especially during COVID and all these times where people are bored as hell. They've got heaps of free time and they want to relive that nostalgia. Like this game could not have come out at a better time.
It's probably also because Tony Hawk fans are also probably really starved of a good Tony Hawk game, considering the latest 2 entries, Pro Skater 5.
And to this game, like Tony Hawk's out in the field. Like I've seen all these trailers of him doing like guerrilla marketing, like going out to the skate parks and like giving out skateboards to these kids that are absolutely rocking it, and he's been hard work.
Say again, Emily. You cut out there a little bit.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying I love Tony Hawk's social media presence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's literally like, do you recognize who this person is today, kind of thing. Like he's got random stories on like airplanes and stuff, and this the flight attendant looks in the overhead and there's 6 skateboards. He goes, "Oh, it's Tony Hawk on the flight," and then he looks down and goes, "Yep, apparently he is."
Wasn't that him or the waitress that that said like, "Are you Tony Hawk?" And he said yes, and she responds with "Why?"
Yeah, why? Yeah. But yeah, like I think the other thing with that, Megan, is it's interesting to point out how we view successful titles nowadays, like the numbers that we talk to make a game successful. Whereas previously, like you say, all the other games were so popular and they sold so many copies, and yet this is still the fastest selling from the point of view of in the first 2 weeks. So it's interesting from the point of view of how quickly games have shifted to that kind of 2 to 4 week cycle for sales, and number 2, how do I say it? Like how many copies are considered a success, and so that to me is also another interesting thing that for Tony Hawk to accomplish that back in the day and then also come into nowadays and sell that many is also very, very interesting to me. But on that note, I think it is time to take a break. We've discussed Tony Hawk enough. Is it worth picking up? I say it's still worth it, even if the multiplayer sucks. But your mileage may vary. Depends if you're walking or skateboarding. Don't worry, I forget I said anything. Anyway, let's go to a break. Come back with Mario 3D Collection. Is that what it's called? Is it Mario 3D Collection? I don't know. 3D All-Stars. 3D All-Stars. That's what it is. Alrighty, welcome back, and thank you for joining us on the live record of the television episode for New Game Plus. Don't forget to check out the rest of our social channels at New Game Plus TV. You can see it changing over there in the bottom corner, and we'll have some more stuff for you as well, and we'll be on Channel 31 in Melbourne and C44 in Adelaide next week with this episode, I believe. Let's discuss Mario All-Stars. So it's probably the worst kept secret that they've had for a long time. It's been rumoured for, it's got to be 8 months, a year, that they were going to release a 3D All-Stars, which included Mario 64, Mario Sunshine, and Mario Galaxy. And it finally released, they announced it, released it within basically 3 or 4 weeks of each other. I want to get the thoughts of you guys on it. Now, I know, Matt, you would have played, obviously, the GameCube one and previous as well. Emma, I don't know your experience with the Mario games. Had you played many of them, like the 3D ones, had you played many of them before this point, or is this kind of your intro to a lot of the earlier ones?
Of the 3, Galaxy was the one I played as a kid, and then I replayed it last year or early this year, so this will be like my 3rd replay in like a year.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And then 64 I played on the Wii, and then Sunshine I never touched, so this is like whole new world. It's exciting. Okay.
And obviously, Cardi, you're a GameCube kid as well. You were of that era. You would have had a bit of time with Sunshine, I assume?
Yeah, I was definitely that one weird kid in primary school, the only kid that had the GameCube. Sunshine was one of those games that I didn't realize was kind of heavily lauded later on in life. I probably spent most of my time with Sunshine, a little bit of Galaxy, but we all know Galaxy's the GOAT, but Sunshine in particular, I hold a very special place in my heart for.
So it's interesting, of course, because I'm, again, much older. I hate to be that guy. And so my main Mario memory was Mario 3 on the NES/Super NES. So I come at it from that different angle of, like, I remember everyone applauding Mario 64 when it came in, everyone talking about how good a game it was. And I've always been of the opinion that it's overrated. To me, it reminds me, it's a lot of, now that people look back at the 64, they look back at Mario 64 with a little bit of rose-tinted glasses, but people forget just how bad that camera was. It's a
bit apples and oranges when you compare a 2D to a 3D. I thought you were going to say that because a lot of people really love Super Mario World. I don't get it. I still think that the third, in terms of momentum and stuff, Super Mario 3 is the best.
I will 100% agree with you on that point as well.
I'm going to get angry emails about that. But yeah, I do agree in the sense that, again, you got to think about it from a time capsule perspective of 64 pioneered a lot of stuff. Like, the way like seesaw physics and stuff work in that game, the way like the movement in that game still is incredible. But if anything, this port, being so, I guess, low quality and cynically released, really highlights some of the how like badly it's aged. Again, in terms of camera, in terms of draw distance, there's a lot of stuff there. When you up it into a better resolution, it just shows just how this game needs a bit more of a lick of paint other than just
you can't hide it. You can't hide it in the N64 fog, because N64 fog was a legitimate phenomenon. Like, smart developers would use it to their advantage, and obviously this game was a launch title, I'm pretty sure, and so it was pre-expansion pack, so you couldn't get that extra 4 meg of memory, and it doesn't sound like much nowadays, but when we're talking this kind of,
the DS had a better excuse as well, in the sense that the screen was smaller, so you couldn't really see many kind of objects and textures kind of pop in, or not texture pop in, just like basically objects in general. So with this one, when you're playing it on a big screen, seeing the chain chomp kind of just zoom in like 2 meters away from you, that's when things gonna kind of get a little bit weird and funky.
Yeah. And it is funny you bring up the DS version, because the DS was an example to me of how you take a remake and do something interesting with it. Suddenly you had 4 pro tags. You could play as Wario. They kind of took the original. They added 30 stars, wasn't there, something on the top of it? Like there was extra stars.
30, so 120 to 150. And it was a very sizable game.
Yeah, and so to me, it's interesting that that's the one they went with. But keep in mind, I've always had a soft spot for Sunshine. Now, when I grew up, the same deal. I had an Xbox and a GameCube before I had a PS2. I won't tell the story of how I got my PS2 on something that's recorded. But basically, so I used to play a lot of Mario Sunshine. I loved it. Like the way the way the movement and stuff works really, really well. Like it took the movement, like the ideas that N64 had about movement, it took them and it added all of these extra athletic, acrobatic abilities to it. And then you add the flood on top of it, and then you add all these, things about it. And like everyone, like when it first came out, people really didn't like Mario Sunshine. I think people have gone back and looked at it and realized that, maybe it wasn't as bad as we remembered. But I guess the main one that stands out to me is there's no pressure sensitivity on those triggers. And that was always the big thing with using Flood on GameCube, was the way the GameCube controller worked was they had the pressure sensitive triggers. So like the analog triggers. So I don't know, does Flood still work as well? Or do you notice obviously that,
Flood still works, but kind of a little less efficiently, in the sense that obviously the pressure-sensitive triggers, the analog triggers of the GameCube is meant to simulate, like Mario like squeezing on like the turkey basters to engage Flood, that kind of stuff. So
it's a different thing, but
it is a different thing. But I feel with just the digital presses, it's very similar to that of like when Metal Gear Solid got released on the Xbox, when the Xbox 360, where obviously the buttons are digital, they're not analog. So obviously when the further you push in a button, the closer you get to slitting an enemy's throat. In Mario Sunshine, on the other hand, like it still works. It's just like you don't get that same nuance that you get if you're playing the GameCube version.
So, like yourself, Emily, who never played Sunshine or had little experience with Sunshine, how did you find it? Was it something that you noticed was off, or was it just something us that we're going to notice?
The flood so much wasn't anything that I had a problem with. It was more so the camera, and I'm on a mini bit, the freaking backwards somersault that I have to run forward and then rip. It's like I could do a whole hour just on that. But it's like I've noticed a lot of reviewers have said that, who have played it earlier and then gone back and played it and noticed that it's actually not that bad. I found out of the 3, it probably had the least structure around it, because I feel like the other 2 kind of hold your hand a little bit more and tell you where to go, and you have a bit more of an idea of like what your objective is. But I feel like Sunshine is a bit more of that like open worldy.
It's a bit more of a discovery game. Like it's find the portals, find all that kind of stuff. But you're a little bit on your own. Whereas with even Mario 64, it's the painting. So basically, you see any painting, try and jump into it. You know what I mean? So you always had an incentive. That's where I'm going to go. Galaxy. Cool. So I see the star thing, or I'm on this planet, and then I'm going to this planet through the star portals and stuff. So you're absolutely right. It's a little bit more directed in the experience, and I think that especially for Galaxy, works in its favor in a big way.
A lot of it's like kind of owed towards the hub worlds, where on Galaxy you're on Rosalina's kind of star. In the original, in Mario 64, basically due to the limitations of the hardware, instead of having this one big cohesive world, procedural world that you go through levels in Mario, they actually had to kind of break it up into these tiny little bite-sized worlds that you jump in via paintings, and it all works. Like it all makes complete sense, just like how Lakitu is your camera. So they kind of got really cute about that. But Sunshine was like the first one where they're like, well, GameCube is like the middle child of that console generation. It's not as powerful as an Xbox, but it's a hell of a lot more powerful than a PS2. So I think Nintendo had a bit more kind of power to kind of work with and really kind of make Delfino Island like a really like massive sprawling place to explore.
Yeah. So and the discs look like a chocolate chip cookie. But I guess the other one as well is with Galaxy. So you've played through it, you reckon, now 3 times, Emily. Like, do you still
probably third? Yeah.
Did you are you still enjoying it? Like, because you said that it's been recent replay. You had a recent replay. Is it still like, are you still thinking that it's worthwhile, or?
I am probably biased just because it's like a childhood favorite.
Yeah.
The one I was like the most excited for. But I definitely think it still holds up. It's kind of got those like quintessential Mario platformer elements that, you go to a Mario game for.
Yep.
I also really like the story in it. I just find it super comforting and nostalgic, and I'm a sucker for anything like that. So yeah,
it's a little bit sad too. Like, they paint Rosalina as this like total sad girl, and you kind of slowly learn about her over time. And like, again, it's really a really endearing journey, and the music's really good too. Like, I think it's the very first Mario game that had an orchestrated score as well, if I'm not mistaken.
So the only other point I think worth bringing up about this game is obviously there's a physical scarcity in the sense that they're only going to make X amount of units. But for the first time, it's a digital scarcity. So if you do not buy the game by, I want to say March 25th, you cannot buy it on the eShop in the bundle. Now, I reckon what they'll do is they'll segregate them out and they'll sell them individually. You could still buy them individually, just be like a higher price or whatever the case may be. But it is interesting from two-prong. Number one, digital scarcity. Like, I mean, this is similar to what they did with the... what was it called? The ambassador program for 3DS, where it was like, if you bought it early and all that kind of stuff, you got these exclusive games that were only available for, this kind of setup. And then, it's just like this really weird spot. But the second one means now that they know that they can get a GameCube emulator and a Wii emulator to work on the Switch. And that in and of itself is pretty big news to begin with.
Did anyone...
Shout out to Wasters for the follow, by the way.
Hi. Did anyone see that article of like Nintendo is suing Nintendo for emulating?
Yeah,
for stealing their own emulator. Yeah. Look, I mean, they've got
maybe that's why they're doing a limited release. They're giving themselves a cease and desist.
Yeah, cease and desist. Yeah, they've got time in between taking down like the Metroid remakes and the Peach sex visual novels to take down their own stuff. That's the important stuff, But
this is an unprecedented time, and it's certainly going to be setting a benchmark of what not to do. And I think if anyone could do it, of course, Nintendo are the ones that have announced something like this. I think they've got extremely strong brand presence and consumer loyalty that people will they'll do it. They'll go out there and buy the game because that it is not being able to be sold after this date. But do you think when Kojima jumped off PT.
We're off to a bad start already. We're talking about Kojima. This is not great for me.
Yeah. People were selling their PlayStations with PT demo installed on them, and they were going for thousands and thousands of dollars. Do you think that this will have the same impact in any way at all? Being able to be sold on other people's Nintendo accounts, something like that? Can you...
Look, I mean, this is always the thing. You still see Switches and stuff up. I bought a second Switch about 8 months ago, right? I needed it for events. Guy was selling it cheap. I didn't ask questions. It all seemed pretty legit. But he didn't have the login for his accounts. And I'm like, okay, well, you're telling me you've got this game on there. Where's the login, son? If I can't transfer it over, where's the login? So I'm like, whatever. I needed the unit anyway. The games were just gravy. So it was kind of much of muchness. But, it really does become that awkward thing of you can't sell accounts. And I mean, it even goes into when you die, you don't technically you can't, if I died tomorrow, I can't will my accounts to anyone. So I can't say, here is my login accounts for all of these things. These are now yours. You cannot pass them on. There's no hereditary link on them. It's a licensing agreement that is person by person. So you can spend thousands of dollars and you can't pass them on. And so there is obviously that question there of, what do digital rights actually mean? And again, this goes back to the idea that they've got this exclusivity on releasing it. It's like, I know that it's your platform and it's your game and you can do whatever the hell you want, for sure. We've had this conversation about Epic recently. But it doesn't mean that it's the right thing to do. Like, it still doesn't mean that it's a good trend for the industry to follow.
No, not at all. And I think we said when this was first announced a couple of weeks ago that I joked that this was because of their end of financial year dates and they were trying to slide in some extra revenue to bump up their fiscal. So
yeah,
it's definitely
that's what I thought the reason that they did it was, but I didn't know if that was like a joke or not.
Well, I mean, it does coincide with the end of financial year for Japan as well, like ending at March. So yeah, it's just like Bandai Namco releasing all their games like January, February, because they know that they're going to sell and it's going to make that quarter look really, really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that is the story of Mario 3D All Stars. What do you guys reckon? Is it still worth picking up, or is it a wait until it's well? You can't really wait. This is the thing. Normally our recommendations are grab it now, wait for it, buy it if you like the series, and then just don't waste your time. But it's hard to recommend people wait. It's not going to go on sale. They don't care. Like it's they've created this artificial scarcity. So what do you guys reckon? Like is it a must buy? Should you rush out and grab it?
I didn't pitch into the review at all, but my 2 cents for this particular pickup is that it's iconic and classic. So if you're a Mario fan of whatever you've experienced in like the next gen, whatever's out that's latest, and you want to revisit that nostalgia or even see what it was all about and how Mario became big, like this is your opportunity to jump in and deep dive into the history of Mario. That's my 2 cents.
Totally agree. Took the words out of my mouth.
yeah, Meg, God.
I'm going to be a bit more negative about it. Galaxy's still great. Sunshine is also good, particularly in the sense that Sunshine's never been re-released until now. So this is probably the only time that you can probably get it, and Nintendo has kind of sat on this game compared to all the other games that they've released. So by all means, again, if you're a fan of Mario or you've never been able to have a chance to play Sunshine and, GameCube versions, unavailable wherever, pick it up. I still think that they definitely could have done a lot more with Mario 64, and if anything, the really lackluster, horrid port of that really highlights just, I guess, the cynicism of Nintendo now. And we can open up another dialogue later on of just how I think they're kind of getting away with a little too much at the moment. It's like, we get it. Like, you've gotten rid of all your Wii U ports, and they're now selling on the Switch, and that's fine. I'll give you a pass for that. But the fact is that you've released Mario 64 over and over again. I probably would have preferred maybe the 64 DS version, but with slightly better assets.
Where's Galaxy 2? Where's Galaxy 2?
Yeah, and it was Galaxy 2, but that's another speculation in the meantime. A lot of people saying that they might announce it later on down the track, or a free patch or an add-on or something. But time will tell. Get it if you like Mario. If not, don't stress. Don't worry about it.
Fair enough. All right, well, on that, we're going to go to another quick break. We'll be back then to discuss Tell Me Why with Megan, the Don't Nod game that came out recently. Stay tuned. All right, welcome back. Thank you for joining us. And we are now going to have a chat about Tell Me Why, which is the newest game from Don't Nod Studios, a French developer who may remember me and probably most well known for Life is Strange. Life is Strange, of course, the kind of the... it's not really a walking simulator. It's not really a point-and-click adventure game. It's just a heavily narrative game. Like, reminds me a lot of, say, What Happened to Edith Finch and stuff like that. Megan, you've had the game obviously for a long time now. What are your thoughts on it? Because I know that you got the review code, so you got it a little bit before the rest of the world did. So you've had a bit of time to digest it. What are your thoughts?
Yes. I snatched that review code so quickly out of anyone at New Game Plus's hand because I am one of Don't Nod's biggest fans. Essentially, this 3-episodic title came out in late August, and it was an Xbox Game Studios exclusives, which means that only Xbox and PC gamers got their little sweaty little hands on it. But essentially, it is one of my favorite genres of games, so I was extremely keen to jump in. And it's essentially nothing like Life is Strange in terms of pacing or storytelling or anything like that. So I really had to separate myself from my expectations of what I was expecting it to be and then what actually was delivered in front of me. And going in cold, really didn't. I tried to avoid all the reviews before or any other speculation around it before jumping in. But essentially, we're introduced to these twins, brother and sister, Alison and Tyler Ronan. They live in this small country town called Delos Crossing. And I love Delos Crossing, the American accent. Anyway, they reunite for the first time in about 10 years after the tragic passing of their mother's death, like 10 years prior. And essentially, the family tragedy tore them apart, with Tyler believing that his identity as a transgender man plays a really integral part in what happened that fateful night. And I guess essentially Tyler's been away at this residential place called Fireweed, sort of copying the flack for that night that happened. And I'm really sensitive about how much to go into the plot for details, because that's like the most exciting part, is seeing that all unfold. But essentially, he reconnects with his sister to help her sell their family home. And as they're packing up their life and saying goodbye to this house, all their childhood memories actually start unpacking, and they discover that their memories aren't what they seem. So whenever the twins experience something emotional, like a memory trigger that they see, like something in the house that they pick up, they see these visions that they can both see at the same time. And it helps them to keep uncovering these unanswered questions about their mother and their past. So it's juicy.
It sounds a little bit like the way I Remember Me did memory stuff was basically everyone had chips in their head, and if you beat a boss, you would inject like particular memories in the right spot to them, and then that would like convey how that. So it sounds like they've gone back to more of that style of, you know, these shared memories and the way that memory is both interpreted and remembered throughout, you know, like the story pace. It actually, like if you're describing that, it really does sound like they've taken cues from What Became of Edith Finch, which was another fantastic game that goes through the legacy of a family and all of the twists and turns that the family kind of goes through. I mean, how do you comparing it to Life is Strange, do you think that's a good change, or did you prefer the way Life is Strange did it? Like, what are your thoughts there?
I think you've summarized that really nicely, Jace, actually. And I think what's really important to take away from what you just said is that, sure, they've done a deep dive on memories and how impactful people's pasts, presents, and futures are on their own personal development. But the reason why they've done it this way is they've actually taken a really big, deep dive on mental illness and heaps of heavy, mature themes. So this isn't actually a whimsical, like, dramatic adventure that Life is Strange delivered in a really beautiful way. This is actually a really realistic approach to serious topics around family violence, emotional trauma, as well as doing a really genuine, authentic representation of Indigenous Native American tribes, as well as queer and transgender representation. And I want to do like a bit of a statement first. So I don't want to butcher my description about this, but I really wanted to call out the fact that throughout this game, Dotnod do a really great job of really warning the player that this game is going to be touching on some deep stuff. And what I really wanted to call out and tell you guys about the most is that this game doesn't rely on those quick, spontaneous reactions to make decisions. Like in Life is Strange, you get like, you know, a quick time event, which makes you press A super quick, and then you're like stuck with the ripple effect of your decision in that split second, and you have to cope with that. Whereas this game, there's no timers, there's no rush. You can take as long as you like to make all your decisions about how you believe you're, like, one of the twins, Alison or Tyler, should be reacting to a really traumatizing experience. And I think the developers really called out that they hope that players out there identify that they're giving these twins realistic reactions that align with real-world experiences compared to previous games in their portfolio. So, like I said, it's not hyperbolic at all, but... Yeah. One thing I was really skeptical about at first is that this game would just become the transgender game. And it's one of the first and only times that a developer's gone into such deep representation of the queer and transgender people. And they could either butcher this or do it exceptionally well. And I'm really pleased to say that they've nailed it. And I wanted to call out that Xbox worked with LGBTQ organisation called GLAAD, which has AA, GLAAD, to really make sure that Tyler was represented in a multi-dimensional way instead of just being like flat and just being there for the sake of ticking a box.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Sorry, cut you off.
Yeah.
No. You go, Em. Yeah. Because I've got a question, but I'll let you go first if you got something to add.
Oh no, I was just saying as well, like I didn't want it to feel like they were just ticking that box. So it's nice to hear that they've really gone and the extra mile and put that effort in and approached it really gently.
Yes.
What I would say is especially when it comes to this kind of representation, obviously it's not something that necessarily like affects me in the sense that like, you know, it's obviously not something that I need to seek because, you know, it's like I'm like me and my ilk are always pretty represented. But I think the problem is, you know, what's considered deep writing when you're talking about trans characters, when you're talking about these experiences. And I don't buy the idea that you have to be like one or the other to write a character that's kind of off-brand, but I think you need to be aware of the sensitivities around it. And so for them to have gone out of their way to do it, as opposed, like, I mean, it's the old trope, you know, even Last of Us, which, you know, to me, like, Last of Us 2 is still a fantastic narrative, and it handles a lot of its things very well, but it does kind of fall into a couple of the tropes. And while it's obviously tropes aren't inherently bad, this is the other thing to remember, but tropes can hide lazy writing, and as long as the writing and the quality of the characterization matches whatever you're trying to say, it's okay for you to write outside your comfort zone, but you just can't be you really can't be insensitive to the idea of, I don't know this experience, I'm just going to guess. It's going to be, I'll just guess. It'll be fine, same difference, like whatever. You know, like, you know, the old joke is bury your gays. Like, you have them do the emotional attachment, then you kill them off. And so The Last of Us comes close to falling down that trap. I don't think it goes quite as bad as it could have, but yeah, it's. I'm glad that you've said that they've actually gone out of their way to make sure it's not that kind of, you know, stereotypical kind of hand wave that we were used to, especially in the early days of gaming.
Yeah.
I just want to touch on what you said about The Last of Us 2 as well. I think the feedback that they got with, you know, the dead naming of Lev, I think that feedback is so necessary because the more that developers do kind of mess up and make those mistakes and, you know, do the wrong thing when trying to represent people, it's like that's how we're going to get better representation. Yeah. So
you nailed it, Em. That's really well said.
Yeah, I think to add on to that as well is if there's anyone who's going to take that advice on board, I mean, these guys changed Outbreak Day to Last of Us Day because they didn't want to upset people for COVID. So they're very sensitive, you know what I mean? So they'll definitely take that advice on board. But it is one of those things where you're right. Like it is unfortunate, you know, particularly with dead naming and stuff. But you know, that's where you have to straddle that line of, well, how do we show that mum's intolerant to this while maintaining that, you know, this is something that shouldn't be done. I don't know what the good answer is there, but I just think that, you've got to be willing to take criticism, especially on things when you're writing off suit, you got to be willing to take criticism on it. And I think to a certain extent, people like, you know, for all my hatred of Neil Druckmann's Twitter feed, I don't think he's the kind of person who would take that on board and you know, and crystallize it and turn it into something nasty. I think that it would be something that they would react to in at least an understanding way and potentially look at fixing for future. But I guess that's off the topic of the game itself. If you were to recommend it to someone, Megan, what would you say is the key thing that Tell Me Why does that you think would sell people on playing the video game?
There's a lot of elements to this game and that make it absolutely beautiful and a must play, especially if you're already fans of the narrative adventure genre. This is a must pick up regardless of your taste and things like that. I think it's an incredible addition to that genre that hasn't really been dabbled in for a while since Life is Strange. But essentially, the environmental design and sound effects are killer. This is one of the most beautifully cinematic games I've ever seen in my life. And because of the slow pace of the game itself, more so than any other Don't Nod title, it actually gives the player so many opportunities to sit and think and ponder so they can really digest all their intensive decision-making they've been doing along these sensitive and mature themes. So it's been a pleasure to sit and look at small town Alaska and those snowy mountains, those beautiful frozen lakes and bushy areas more than I ever expected. But also the fact that Tell Me Why actually sets the bar not only for their portrayal of mature themes, but it deep dives in a really delicate way with poetic justice. The way that the dialogue is written is really, really mature. And I keep saying that word, but I think it's
So we got to grow up eventually. Games have got to grow up eventually. We're getting there, but sometimes we don't do too good.
There's a lot of puzzles as well in this game, which make it a bit more juicy, as well as just discovering and uncovering all these secrets, which makes your brain think, and it does add a lot of value there. But essentially, what it does best is really just seeing how much care and detail they've given into the queer and transgender character. But I really loved seeing and comparing my own choices at the end of every chapter to compared to all the other players out there in the universe that have also done it. So I think that it does play to its strengths, and it is absolutely a must play for sure.
All right. On that note, we are going to pack it in. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. Where can people find more of your content, Megan? We'll go around the room if they want to follow you on Twitter or whatever the case may be.
Megzatron22 on Twitter, but also my interviews are up on the New Game Plus YouTube.
Emily?
You can find me on Twitter at Emmy_Shiel, Shiel, and all my writing is on there. So,
and Mr. Cardi.
I haven't really been on Twitter that much, so I'm just posting a bunch of like really funny, happy snaps on Instagram of all my gaming paraphernalia. Catch me at instagram.com/Karty Party with 2 Y's at the end of each one. So that's KARTYY PARTYY. And there's a lot of cool, fun things happening there.
And you also do the Wednesday night shift for us here on the New Game Plus Twitch channel. Yes. We'll have some more interesting and cool stuff coming up for you soon. After the break, we're going to end the show for now, and we will come back with some Among Us. But to end the show, do not forget to check out newgameplus.tv, all of our Instagram, all of our socials at New Game Plus TV if you want more of our content. Thank you for watching. We will see you next Thursday for the show record. Hang around for some Among Us, and we'll see you later.
Stay tuned.
Bye.